All right, let's do Sidewinder here and check it out. This is just hit number one, and I've listened to it just once, but let's go ahead and break it down. All right, here we go. So beats. Okay, so there we go. That's a P8, a punk that happens at the 8. What's a punk? A punk is when, if you have like an English sentence, you've got like a period in the, it's punctuation points, right? You got a period, you got a comma in the middle, you got a period at the end. The period is more dramatic than the comma. And so you could think of like punks as the grammar of an 8-bar section. So something happens kind of maybe in the middle. That's the middle punctuation point. I would call that the P4 because that would be like the 4-bar mark. And then something more dramatic typically will happen at the 8-bar mark. So that could be like the period. So we have the comma in the middle. We have something more dramatic at the end, the period. And so a little bit of a grammar of an 8-bar section. We can extend that to like 16 bars. So typically something at the end of 16 bars will be more dramatic than what happened at the 8-bar mark. So we've got like a P4, which is like a little thing that may or may not come up. We'll definitely get like a P8, and so that was a P8. That's probably going to be the thing that they play at the end of an 8-bar. So P8, punk at the 8-bar mark, and then P16, and then we can get more granular. Okay, but the most important ones are going to be the furthest ones out. So the 8, the P8, the P16, and then we also have like a P4 is really important. Also, and then we can go more granular, so we can have something at the 2-bar mark, we can have something at the 6-bar mark, and we can kind of work our way down like that. But the 4, the 8, most important. Okay, so here we got a little 8, and we'll probably hear that multiple times. So boom shot, and there we go. There's the P8 again, but this right here would be like a P16, right? So we have the P8, and then we get this big edit here, and you can think of that as the P16. What I want to focus on is that vocal. So this is a very typical thing to do, one of the check boxes, which is just do an intro hook tease. An intro hook tease. Take whatever the hook of your track is and stick it right before the bass drop. The bass drop is next. Alright, so in the bass drop here, what you want to do is just introduce the bass line. We got to teach people how to move, groove, and dance to the track before we start throwing hooks on top. And if we throw hooks on top right now, it's going to overwhelm the listener. We got to give them a chance to get into the track, understand how the track moves, and then we can start putting things on top. Because once they get it, they can start dancing to it. It becomes automatic, and then they can start paying attention to something else. But if we threw the groove and the hooks if we threw the bass, the groove, and the hooks all at them at once, that would be a little bit too overwhelming. All right, so far, checking off the boxes. We've got the beats in the intro. We've got the intro hook tease. Now we're moving into the bass drop, and we only have the bass. Okay, so those are like the most important things so far. Okay, there we go. Now we got a P4. Okay, so that happened at the 4-bar mark. We have this little whoop, 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 whoop. Okay, and so that, I mean, it doesn't matter so much like what you do there, just that you do something most of the time. Like, you could have done anything. You could have done a vocal chop. You could have done, but he chose to do some like weird kind of unique effects, and that's cool, right? But it doesn't matter what you do. It just matters that you do it. Okay, so right away, right there in the bass drop, he gives us a P4, or they give us a P4, Gorgon City. And there we go. This is what I call a signpost. So when you have like a punk that repeats, and typically I do, like a P8 that repeats across the entire track, then it becomes a signpost to the listener. They understand what's going to happen. They understand we're coming to the end of a section, so we're going to start going to the next one. Okay, and so it's a signpost. It signals to the listener. And so now, so here in the bass drop, this is very typical to have 16 bars. This is very typical in the last 2 years, where we have 16 bars of intro, 16 bars of bass drop. And when we're in the bass drop, the question for me is, okay, we have an A section and a B section. Okay, so the A section is where we just introduce the bass line, just like what happened. And then the only other thing that we got there, the only other thing that we got in the A section of the bass drop is we got a P4. We have a P4, a P8, and a groove. That's all that's happening there, and that's exactly right. And so next, my question is, though, in the B section of the bass drop, in the second 8 bars, what is usually going to happen is we could lift the energy somehow with the sound, or we're going to start to transition into the break. And so that's what I'm going to be listening for here. Are we going to lift the energy somehow? Are we going to start to transition somehow? Maybe both. So 2 lifts right there. Well, number 1, we're getting that weird vocal effect. So that's a little bit of a hook lift, a little bit of a cool thing. So now at this point, we already understand the bass line. It's very simple. Boom, 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 boom. We get it. So now we can start putting things on top. But it's kind of like an effect. I wouldn't really call this like a hook of the track. It's just something like, oh, that's cool. But another thing that's going on here that's really cool is they're introducing an atmosphere. And that's really cool because what that's doing is hinting at the break that's coming up. One of the important things to do in a break section is to create a sense of atmosphere. This isn't necessary, right? But it's a really good practice to just create a sense of atmosphere. We'll talk about that more in a second. But the fact that he's getting these kind of swirly atmospheric things in here in the bass drop is actually really unique. It previews the bass that comes up in a subconscious way, and it's not actually something that I hear very often. A lot of times what you do in the bass drop in the B section is you start to tease the hook that is going to start playing here in the in the break. But this is really cool because they are teasing what's to come in a unique way. Okay, that's what I'm saying. Usually you tease with the hook, but they're teasing with a kind of atmospheric type of thing. And so that's really cool. Ooh, so that was interesting because we didn't get the P8 there, right? We didn't get that. So for whatever reason, they decided not to put that there. Oh, there it is. So it looks like this is a little bit of a high pass before we get into the break. So this is a little bit of an edit before we get into it. There we go. Okay, so we did actually get it. So now we're in the break, okay? Okay, so that's what I call a cliff dive. A cliff dive is when you go from here energy level to boom, all the way down to the bottom. And what's cool about this, and this actually came up in a track that I think is on South of Saturn. It's a new track that's called Party. But they also do this where they do a cliff dive in the break. They do it halfway through the break. But in both cases, when you cliff dive here, what I love about it is they're going into kind of a repetitive style vocal. And when you have a repetitive style vocal in a break section, that naturally builds tension. Think of like a snare roll. Snare roll is about as repetitive as it gets, right? Just 16th notes. Da, 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 da. But when you have a vocal repetition, that is building tension in a very similar way. And so here what we're getting is right away, we're getting a little bit of tension. We're getting a little building energy. Another extremely important, and what I think is the one of the most important things in the break, is when you drop into the break, especially right here out of the bass drop, you want to introduce something new or different. Okay, so this is just straight up introducing something new. We haven't heard this vocal yet, so they're just introducing it right away. It has a little bit of a low pass on it, so we know that that's going to open up. That's also going to create some tension, some energy, some directional energy towards the drop here. It's also a little bit repetitive, which is also creating a little bit of tension and directional energy towards the drop. Okay, so a lot of good things here. So let's just kind of recap going from the bass drop into the break so far. So from the bass drop, we have the A section, which is just chill, dude. We're just introducing the bass line. Okay, we got a P4, P8, check, check. And then in the B section, they do a couple lifts. They have they have that weird vocal effect, and they also introduce the Atmos, which kind of teases a break that we're going to kind of go into a break section. And then they go into a break, and what you have to do in a break, first and foremost, obviously, is give them a break. That's what a break is, and you usually do that by just simply taking away the low end, because the low end is what people dance to. So you take that away from them. And now, when the groove is gone, when that low end is gone, you got to give them something to pay attention to. Okay, and that's why in the first break here, after the bass drop, this is where you want to introduce that new thing. Usually it's going to be the hook of the track. And so that's exactly what's going on here. But there's also a lot of cool little other things that they're doing. So they're introducing something new. That's the vocal hook. They are that vocal hook is repetitive, just like I'm being right now. I'm repeating myself a lot. So it's repetitive, so it's building energy. It also has a low pass on it, which we know is going to open up, and that's also building some tension, some directional energy as we move towards the drop. Okay, so let's check it out. And so this kind of has like a stutter effect on it, so you could use that with like Ableton's Auto Pan. You can use that with a tremolo later or whatever, tremolo effect. Or a really popular technique is in Ableton. If you have the vocal and you open up the clip editing whatever, and you change the transient mode to the forward arrow, you can reduce the gate. You can reduce the time on there. And all right, so for example,
I be racing and I don't even know what I'm chasing yet.
So this is kind of like a fast vocal, but if you come over in Ableton, you come to warp, you go to the beats, you go to transients, you go to the forward mode here, or the arrow that way. Then if I pull down on this, this acts like a gate effect.
I be racing and I don't even know what I'm chasing yet. Been in and out of relationships. I'm starting.
All right, now I could also, instead of change this to transients, I could do to like 16th notes.
I be racing and I don't even know what I'm chasing yet. Been in and out of relationships. I'm starting to see that it's me with a compliment.
And so that creates like a nice kind of stutter effect. All right, and so that's kind of what they're doing here. Another way, obviously, to do that is with just like a tremolo or something, but that's been a really popular technique that comes up a lot, especially in like Sid's tracks. But okay, there we go. So we've got like this nice repetitive vocal. You could hear it opening up with the low pass. It's got a nice stutter on it. It's repeating. It's building tension. What else happens?
When I might get deep out of this, how did they got this on to make it like these? I'm over right behind me on board. Speed low, did it like they do.
Okay, snare roll. Okay, so what can we do to build tension? Rep, roll, rise, and grow. So rep is to have some kind of hook repetition. We've got that kind of with the vocal, especially with that stutter effect. Rep, roll. This is going to be like a snare roll or a kick roll. Snare roll is most common, so here we go. We got a snare roll. Rise is going to be something that goes up, typically a riser. That would be the most like on the nose type of thing. Another thing is opening up a low pass filter. So right away we've got rep, we've got roll, we've got rise, and then grow would be to grow the space somehow. So going out into a reverb or using delay somehow to create some kind of growing feeling. But so far we don't feel that, but we do have the first three, which is rep, roll, rise. You don't have to have all the tension building elements in the break, especially the first break. In the main break, you can have all of them going, so it creates like maximum build energy. But here you can strip it back. You know, you don't have to have it go crazy. So we have those three right here. So there we go. We have a straight up rise too. So that's giving another rise. So we've got a lot of nice, just straightforward tension building elements going on here. All right. So that is, now we're going into the hook drop here. The hook drop is where you start putting the hooks over the groove. So let's check it out. And there you go. Okay, right away. Okay, what do we have? We have hooks over groove. Like, you know, just check it off the boxes. Doing exactly what he needs to do. They need to do. And so, obviously, what's really cool about this is that wub, right? That slow opening of the filter, the slow attack on the filter, closing it down, a little bit of reverb as the entry sound. You know, especially in 2022, I haven't heard a lot of tracks that had big entry sounds. Like back in 2021, there were tons of tracks that had entry sounds on them. The biggest example of an entry sound, this was I think 2019, was Fisher's Losing It. But last year, Chapter and Verse's, oh gosh, what the heck is the name of that track? So lights go out. That was, yeah, that had a lot of entries, but in 2022, not so much. So this is actually kind of the first track I've heard that has an entry. It's not like crazy. It's actually really cool and unique. It's like a wub sound. So that's really cool. So right away, we've got some awesome stuff going into the hook drop one. We've got a nice unique entry, which is that wub, and we're just going straight into that kind of stutter effect hook. So over the groove. So pretty simple. Okay, got a little piano stab there on the right, so just spicing it up. I want to see where that is. So that happens at the 2, so you could call that a P2. And so my guess is we're going to get something at the 4 as well. There you go. Okay, so we get another wub. What does that sound like compared to the other one? So that one's bigger, so we're opening up the filter just a little bit more. So that one, the filter just doesn't open up quite as much. So the entry is bigger than the P4 here. My question is, are we going to get something at the 6? And there we go. We get the piano. So, I mean, how much is just checking off the boxes? You know what I mean? So over here in the intro, we got a P8. Okay, and that's going to be that little ding-ding sound design percussion-y thing. And then in the bass drop, that's when we started filling out the P4s. When we get into the drop now, in the hook drop, we got the P4 wub. We've got, we're probably going to get that P8 kind of sound design percussion thingy. But we also have a P2 and a P6, and that's going to be that piano stab. And so in this drop right here, within the first 8 bars, we've got so much good stuff, so much basic stuff. And let's just, what is it? Okay, number 1, we've got an entry into the hook drop. Now that's not necessary, but it is cool. Okay, and it's unique here. Number 2, what do we have? We have a hook over the groove, right? That's what a hook drop is really, a hook over a groove. And that's going to be the stutter effect. Third, what we have is the punks. We've got a P2, we got a P4, we got a P6, and my guess, I'll put like $1,000 down. We're gonna get a P8. Here we go. And there we go. We get that same P8 that we got way back there in the intro, the first little thing that we got. Okay, so next what we're doing is he's lifting the energy. How is he lifting the energy? He's adding in a very gentle air type of ride. Did we get a little wub right here? Okay, there's the P2. Okay, there's the P4. We got the whoop, 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 whoop effects into the kind of softer wub. Okay, P6 with the piano. And now, guess what? Okay, what was I talking about before? The P16 is usually going to be bigger than the P8. So we should expect to get an edit right here. There you go. Okay, we got a riser, and they completely take out the drums. So now this is really important. Something that's come up a lot in my producer community is when you stop the groove like that, that can really kill the vibe. And so what you need is you need something that gives you kind of like a gravity or a pull into the next section. And they have that here. So they completely cut out things, but they have a white noise type of thing, very simple, that just pulls you into the next section, creates a little bit of gravity. Check it out. Really cool. And we go out into a little bit of chaos there with the you know, I just thought of like this term entropy. That's another way to kind of think about it, because over time things just become more chaotic. And so here I mean, anyway, so that just might be a little concept that I might want to play around with. And that's especially true in the breaks. As time goes on, these things just get crazier. And so that could build into a little concept of entropy here. But that's kind of what's cool here, too. And so that kind of like chaos with the delays, that's going to spill over. And so right away here now in the hook drop, what we're getting is we're going to get a nice clean A section and a clean B section. Okay, so here we have... and that's going to be, you know, even over here in the bass drop, we were talking about an A section and a B section. And that's really important to think about, especially in drops. In breaks, you do have a clean A section and B section, but it's really simple. An A section, B section of the break is just going to be a break, where you're giving people a break, and then a build, which is where you're typically building energy. But in a drop, I really like to think about A section, B sections too. And so what's going to define the A section? What's going to define the B section? So the A section here is defined by that vocal. Okay, so here we're going to go into the B section now. Okay, so obviously the B section here opens up a little bit more, and we're getting that boom shakalaka whatever that we got over here in the intro. So bringing that back, so we've got the entry, we got the boom shakalaka, we're still continuing the punk structure, which is that piano, and let's see what else happens. So a little bit of weird stuff too going on there right before the 4. So here's the 4, the P4. P8. Okay, so what is the B section now? The B section is obviously more sparse. We took the vocal away. We're keeping the same punk structure, which is going to be entry wub, the P2 piano, the P4 kind of effects, and then the softer wub, the P6 piano, the P8 little sound design perk, okay? And then what we're also getting is just a little bit after the entry wub, we're getting that boom shakalaka kind of vocal. And so that's really it. And so it's really just kind of a more sparse section, keeping the punk structure with the boom shakalaka. And I'm guessing that the exact same thing is going to happen in the next 8 bars. Just rewind it a little bit. Cool, but what did they do here? They added in something new, right? It was the Atmos that we got back here in the bass drop. So they're using that as a signal to the listener that there's going to be a big change. Again, previewing, foreshadowing the bass. Anytime you add atmosphere, that's kind of going to be teasing the break, because in the break you want to create atmosphere. And I said we were going to talk about that earlier, but I forgot. But let me just step back. And in the break, what do you want to do? We kind of covered it. We want to give them a break. We want to introduce something new and different. And then a couple other things that are really important is, number one, creating a sense of atmosphere. They don't really do that here, and so that's why this is kind of like an asterisk. It's not really like, it's just a good practice. And another thing, obviously, that you do in breaks is build, right? That's just what you do, especially the second half of the break. So those kind of 4 things are the 4 check boxes that you should be looking out for in your own tracks. The 2 most important are give them a break, introduce something new. Okay, but here, which is really cool, is they're using this atmospheric kind of thing to tease the upcoming breaks, and that's exactly what's happening right here as well. And so in the B section, what do we have? We have the groove, we have the punk structure, which is, I'm not going to cover that again because we've said it multiple times. We have the punk structure, we have the boom shakalaka vocal, okay, and that happens twice. Okay, so that's 16 bars. But in the second 8 bars of the B section here, we're getting a callback to the atmospheric lift. So that's really cool, okay, and that's really simple. And yet that's what I want to emphasize, is how simple this is. Like, you might look at this and be like, oh my God, there's so many sounds. No. It's a groove, and it's a very simple punk structure. Wub, here I go again, talking about it. Wub, piano, little P8 sound design thingy. Okay, boom, 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 every single time, with the little boom shakalaka thrown in. Okay, so very, very simple. And so if you just come up with your own entry, P4, if you come up with your own P2 stab, P6 stab, come up with your own P8. There you go. Okay, you can mimic the structure, you can model it, and it can be completely unique. And because a punk structure is, everybody uses them, you know what I mean? And so it's just fun now to be like to hear how they're doing it, and then use that as inspiration to kind of come up with your own. Because I'd want to go, I want to go play with wub sounds now. That's what I want to do, and I want to see what I can do using this as inspiration. Because the form, the model, is all in my head now, so I could just kind of play around with this stuff. So we got the A section, we got the B section. Now we're going to move into this section, which is a very interesting section. Let's listen. So this is so weird, Okay, so here typically what we would do is we'd go into a break. There's many different ways that we can go into the main break. Number one, we can go into a strip section. This is going to be the kick, bass, and usually like a hook on top. You've heard this a million times, where we just kind of start settling the energy, taking away some of the drums, getting that kick and the bass still going with the nice little hook on top. That's the strip. That's one way. Second way is just a clean high pass into the break. Okay, we just keep things going. We just do a high pass and maybe something else comes in like the hook. Okay, so that is just a simple high pass. And then the third is just a cliff dive. A cliff dive is like what we had over here, where the groove, everything just stops and we go into something new. Okay, so those are typically the three ways to transition into the main break and build. But here, they're just doing something totally new and unique, you know, which is just continuing the groove, almost creating like a C section, you know, not with a pregnancy, but, well, you know, just a C section here, just with these random melodies that are cool, they're catchy, so that's why it works, but they don't ever come up ever again anywhere else in the track. And so that's just kind of fun. It's unique. It's interesting. It works because the groove is still going. It's not like throwing a curveball really into anything. And so, yeah. But another thing is that we're getting a call back to the that kind of weird stuttery vocal effect that we had in the B section of the bass drop. So that's coming back over here too. So there's a little bit of familiar elements coming back. Some of the punks too. That piano punk is still there. But the wub punks have gone away. So we're getting this interaction between the vocal effects, kind of that banana melody, and the piano. But honestly, this is an anomaly. This is an anomalous thing to do here. This is not common, and that. And some producers, I think, would take away from the fact that, oh, well, that's what makes this track so good. And I would say, no. I would say what makes this track so good is just the other basics that this track is sticking to. Just because it's doing one thing different doesn't mean that's the reason why it's so good. The big wub entry is a big draw for this track. Also the hook. It's always going to be the really big things. It's got a good groove. It's got an interesting, stuttery, fast-paced, energetic hook. And that wub thing is really, 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 really cool. And so those, for me, would be the three things on why this track works. Not necessarily the fact that it has this really anomalous little section between HD1, hook drop 1, and the break. Okay? Okay, so there we go. Now we're getting a cliff dive. So a cliff dive into what we were getting earlier over here in break 1. Let's check out how it develops. Okay, drums. This is something that we didn't get before. Okay, so they're doing a little bit of lift here with the drums, high pass and low pass, little bracketing. But again, one of the things I want to point out here is remind you of the 4 ways really that we can build energy. There's 5, but we're only going to cover 4 here. And so that's going to be the rep, roll, rise, and grow. Okay, so here we already have kind of a rep. The vocal is repetitive by nature, plus that stutter effect is also kind of building into that repetitive type of thing. Rep, roll, rise, grow. Then when we're getting that lift with the drums, we know that the drums are restricted in the frequency spectrum, so we kind of expect them to expand in the frequency spectrum later on, so that's going to give us kind of a rising feeling as the drums kind of come up. I don't remember if they do in fact come up, but we can anticipate that they do, so that could be, so rep, roll, rise, grow. So we can look for a snare roll. We can also look for the space growing. Let's check it out. Okay, so immediately you can hear the grow. So the vocal's starting to kind of go into a reverb, maybe a delay. Let's check it out. Definitely a space. So we're getting into a reverb. So we have rep, we have rise maybe with the drums. We're definitely going to get a riser, and we have grow so far. So you can hear those drums come up, so that's kind of a rise. I love that because it's not necessarily an on-the-nose rise where we're just getting a riser, although those are very effective and we're probably going to get one. Okay, so now we're getting a chaotic rep here. This builds a lot of tension. So the vocal was repetitive by nature, just kind of the way that the guy's performing the verse or whatever. But now we're getting into a proper rep, which is where we're taking a piece of that vocal and we are repping it. Another thing that they're doing is I think they're using delay, which is another way to kind of grow the vocal. They're using delay to create a more chaotic feeling, more anxiety, more tension. So what do we have here? We have the drums that are coming up. We've got the vocal, which is now hardcore repeating with delay and reverb. So we have grow as well. And so, I mean, that's interesting. Just creating, you know, I wouldn't say this is like maximum tension, but creating a lot of tension with those elements and just letting that tension sit and then just smack them as you come back. Now, the fifth thing that you can do, and I guess I will go into it, is the pipo. Okay, so rep, roll, rise, grow, pipo. Rep, roll, rise, grow, pipo. Pipo stands for pattern, interrupt, payoff. Okay, pattern, interrupt, payoff. So what you do a lot of times, and you've heard this a million times, is the tension just grows and grows and grows. You're building the tension pattern through the rep, roll, rise, and grow. Okay, those are all communicating. Build, 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 tension, 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 anxiety, right? And then with a pattern, with a pipo, what you do is you cut that. You stop that. You stop the build pattern. And that is just alarming. It wakes people up. It creates that kind of like fight or flight kind of freeze response. Like, what's going on? They get woken up. You deliver a payoff. So pattern, interrupt, pay off. And then you explode into the drop, okay? So that's what we're not getting here. We're not getting a pipo, and that's kind of weird, and I kind of like it. I call this a momentum drop, where you're just building and building and building, and it just almost reaches the breaking point, the tipping point, and then it just cracks and it breaks into the groove. And so that's another way to kind of go into HD2 here, hook drop 2, is just that momentum, that just peak out at the peak moment of tension, you then break into the drop. The pipo is much more common because psychologically it just grabs people's attention. It just wakes them up right there at the moment, and then you explode. So right at the moment when people are super hyped, they're paying attention, like you've got their absolute focus. You've got them right there in your hand, and then boom, you explode. So it really creates like a really impactful moment with the pipo, and that's why they're so used. But this is another way to do it, which is a little bit more of momentum. You at the peak moment of tension, the maximum tension, that's when you just drop into it, and that's kind of what they're doing here. Okay. Okay, cool. So we're getting a little bit. So a couple things here. When we have the hook drop 2 here, this is a hook drop, right? We're putting hooks over grooves. So hook drop 2, hook drop 1. With hook drop 2 here, one of the questions that we can ask is, how is HD2 elevated? That's the term I like to use. Elevated over HD1. Sometimes you don't need to do this whatsoever. HD1 and HD2 can be exactly the same. An example of that is John Summit's La Danza. Okay, they're exactly the same. But of course, as producers, we want to feel creative. We want to feel good about ourselves, and we want to do things. And so what are the ways that we can have HD2 elevated over HD1? And here we see a very simple way, which is just putting the ride lift in right away. So if we come back over to HD1, we don't have a ride. But here we do. We get that nice little air ride on top. Another thing that they're doing here is they're adding in another little wub. Okay, and so they're filling the spaces now even between the other punks. So remember the punk structure that we had before. We had on the 1, we had the entry. The 2, we have the piano stab. On the 4, we have a little bit of effects that go into the other wub. On the 6, we got the piano stab. And on the 8, we got that kind of sound design percussion thing. Now what they're doing is they're going even more granular, and they're starting to put other little, they added a little wub. Let's see where that happens. Okay, so that's happening on the 1. Okay, so on you know, after the first bar. So you see, they're just filling the gaps. I kind of want to draw this out just to show you what I mean. So, all right. So let me turn on a light real quick. All right. So I could have done this probably in Ableton, but I thought this was going to be faster. But this is what I'm talking about. Okay. So in the intro, what we have that just beats, and then we have that little sound design percussion thingy that plays over here. Boom. Okay, that brr, brr, right? So maybe fast delay on that, whatever. But then in the bass drop, what we do is we're going to get a P4. So over here, this is our P8. And the bass drop, we're going to have a P4, which is a little bit of effects before the 4-bar mark, and then just a little bit of a splash on it. Okay, so let's check that out over here. Okay, so whoop, 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 whoop. Okay, and then at the end, we're going to get that sound design thing. Okay, so there you go. And then in HD1, you can see what we're doing is just filling the gap. So here we have the P8, then we filled in the P4. Now we're going to fill in the P2. You see that? And they also give, that's where we also start to get our little hooky entry wubs, our little wubs, okay? So P8, P4, P8, P2, P4, P6, P8. Okay, so here in the HD1. Okay, so there we go. We got our wub. That's our entry. Then we got the piano stab just now. That's a P2. The whoop, 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 and the double kick. That's going to be, counting that all part of the P4. And then boom, that wub right there. That's part of the P4. There we go. That's a stab. Boom. Okay, that's the P6, and then we're going to get the sound design perk. Okay, so there you go. You see we have the P8. We're filling in the P4 here in the bass drop. We're filling in the P2 and the P6 here in HD1. And then in HD2, one of the ways that they're lifting the energy or elevating the energy over and above HD1 is they're starting to fill even more of these gaps here. So you can see how systematic this is, how organized it is. Anybody listening to HD2 might be like, oh my God, there's so much going on. But no, there's really not. When you understand the clear development of the punks, then you can see exactly what's going on. It makes perfect sense. All right, so let's come over to HD2 here. Okay, there we go. So we're getting our entry wub. There we go. We get a little tiny wub there. And B wub just stands for big wub. Okay, so this is the big wub. This is the little wub. And I circled these guys because this wub is just a little bit bigger than this one too. This one, the filter opens a little bit more than this one. So we have the big wub. Then we have the little wub here. We got our piano stab, the P2. Okay, then we're going to get a wub in between the P2, P4. Okay, and then the whoop, 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 laser stuff right here, and then the big wub on the 4. Okay, there's our wub right here. Piano stab. Boom. Okay, the wub. And then we got our sound design perk right there. And so there you go. Just a very linear development, very logical, you could say. You know, as creative as music is, there's a whole logic to it. There's a whole math to it sometimes, and we're literally looking at it right here. This is just natural development. Very well done, you know. Okay. Alright, cool. And there you go. What do we get? We get pretty much the same thing. We got a nice dramatic edit here at the end of the 16 bars. The ride carried the whole thing all the way through. So this is just really just 2-bar sections duplicated. Ride playing on top raises the energy over HD1, especially over the first 8 bars. And then we get a little bit of a chaos thing here happening at the P16. Okay, then we get that nice chaotic delay that just spills the momentum over into the outro. And in this track is really interesting because really it just systematically works its way down. It just takes more and more and more of these elements away, and that's how it breaks down as it goes through the outro. So let's just pay attention to what gets subtractive. What gets subtracted. So this has a subtractive outro, but it happens in very kind of discrete stages. A lot of times with the outro, like you play for 16 bars and then something dramatic goes away, and then something dramatic goes away. You're working down in these big steps, but this from this point on, it just kind of works down in gradual kind of stages. So let's see what happens, okay? So the big thing that goes away, you know what, I'm getting a little bit earlier. So now we're just going back to the B section here. So the B section here, of course, is the boom shakalaka thing. So we're getting the punk structure and the boom shakalaka. One thing to note is we don't have these little wubs. Okay, so when we get into HD2B, those little wubs go away. Okay, but we're getting that boom shakalaka. Okay, so we're getting some of the punks. So now we're getting into the outro. So the B section of HD2 is very similar to the B section in HD1. And again, remember, what happened here in this little 8-bar section, kind of a bridge section into the main break and build, those little melodies, they never come back, right? So that's what's kind of interesting and unique about this track, is that weird kind of anomalous section. But that doesn't come back, and at this point, we are properly in the outro, okay? So what's going to happen is, again, we're going to work down the punks in stages. So let's just see what happens. So we have the entry there. Let's listen to that again. Okay, so they actually keep the boom shakalaka going. So we could just consider that as a part of this whole kind of subtractive process. Okay, so finally the boom shakalaka goes away. Okay, so it plays the 3 times, and you can see they're just systematically removing these punk elements. Okay. Interesting. So they took away the P8 right there. Okay, so they're just systematically removing things. So let's see what happens in the next 8 bars. What goes away? So almost a little bit of randomness to it here, but basically what's going on is we're keeping, for the most part, the same punk structure. You can see from HD1 the wub, the piano, the wub, the piano, and then the SD perk. That just keeps on going. Okay. And so, yeah, I mean, the only things I guess really went away, and I thought this was going to happen in more stages, but not really. It's pretty straightforward. So in HD2 right here, the thing that we got was these little wubs, and these little wubs went away in the B section. And in the B section, what we got that boom shakalaka. That played for 16 bars, and then through these 16 bars right here, we pretty much just have this going. So it's just groove plus these punks. That's what it is. So the outro starts off with the groove plus these punks. And then here in the very last, which is also kind of interesting, usually you'd break it down to just beats or something like that, but here they're just breaking it down to the bass. So beats and punks. So there you go. Again, this like weird stuff isn't really what makes a track, in my opinion. What makes a track is, again, what I was talking about earlier, is just a good groove. That's number one. And then that energetic hook, that would be like, and the big entry wub. Those are like the three big things, because, you know, at the end of the day, tech house music is just hooks over groove. And so what are the big things there? Well, it's a cool groove. So there we go, check. And then when it comes to the hooks, what are the big things there? And the big things there are the energetic stutter vocal and the big wub. And those are just really cool. So, I mean, and then from there, it's just telling a simple story. This is just straight up the HD2 formula. We've got the intro, we've got the bass drop, we've got break 1, we've got hook drop 1, we've got the main break and build, we've got hook drop 2, and then we have the outro. All right. And in the hook drops, we have proper hook drops. We got big hook over big groove. In HD2, same thing, big hook over big groove. HD2 is elevated over HD1 because it starts off with the ride right away, plus those extra little wubs that we get. But other than that, that's it. Like, there's nothing else crazy. We're not moving sections around. We're not reinventing the genre. You know, we're not like getting these new crazy hooks on top. Just all simple. And the reason why is because the kind of story of the HD2 formula, and again, that's going to be intro, bass drop, break 1, HD1, main break and build, HD2, outro. The story of HD2 is very simple. In HD1, we give them what they want. And what they want is the hooks over the groove. So we give them what they want. Then in the main break and build, we take that away from them. So in this case, what we do is we really take away the groove. And we have a low pass vocal that's, you know, that just kind of builds the energy. So we take away what they want in some way. And then in HD2, all we have to do is give it back to them. So here what we're doing is we're building tension, telling the listener, hey, we're going to give you back the cool stuff. And then boom, you give it back to them. And then it's up to you, if you want to, as a producer, as a creative person, you can decide how you want to elevate that over HD2. But if you do something crazy and different and weird in HD2, then you're not going to be ultimately satisfying the listener. You're not going to be giving them what they want. And the main break and build, you're creating that craving feeling. You gave them something cool, right? They want it again, right? It's like, hey, I like that. I would like to listen to it again. You know what I mean? But if you like bushwhack them, throw them a curveball and do something different here, then you're not ultimately satisfying. You're not ultimately understanding what it is that you're doing in the track, which is introducing something that they like, taking it away, giving it back to them. And if you want to, you can elevate it. And in this case, what they did is they added in that ride, and they also added in those extra little wubs. But really, in a nutshell, that's all that's happening here. It's just yeah, that's really it. And just backing up one more time, when I'm looking at this, for example, if I was going to recreate it, what am I going to do? Well, first of all, I'm going to go after a cool groove sound. You know, that's an interesting bass sound with some cool harmonics, so I'm going to build the groove. And then when it comes to the hooks and the development of the track, you can see that the first 16 bars here is just kind of like a cool stutter vocal. And so that's just a big hook over a big groove. Okay, and then the other important thing that's going on here is the punk structure. This track is a great example of punks in action working their magic. And so that's what I would focus on. I'd focus on getting a cool groove. I'd focus on getting a big hook, making sure that works for 16 bars over my groove. And then what I would do is I'd start working on the punk structure. And you'd pretty much have a track, because then you can lay it out exactly the way it is here. And that's not copying. That's not, you know, stealing what they're doing. They're using the HD2 formula, which is what 90% of top tracks are using, you know. But what this is giving me inspiration is like directions that I can go to get something that could work for me, using this as a model, finding that good groove, finding that cool vocal that works for 16 bars over the groove, and then finding a cool hook structure, finding a cool punk structure that can interact maybe with the vocal in an interesting way, using unique sounds, little splashes, little ear candies that just pop out and grab the listener. And so that's how I would approach this if I was going to use this as inspiration. But it's a really cool track. Personally, what I love about it is that wub. I love that freaking wub. That is so cool. But that's all I got for this track. If you got any questions, leave them down below, and I'll see you in the next breakdown. Peace.